The 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching, quote, "There is a saying among soldiers, I dare not make the first move, but would rather play the guest. I dare not advance an inch, but would rather withdraw a foot." This is called going forward without advancing, pushing back without using weapons. There is no greater misfortune than feeling, I have an enemy. For when I and enemy exist together, there is no room left for my treasure. Thus, when two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph. When armies are evenly matched, the one with compassion wins. Unquote. Living without enemies. Imagine a world with a common heritage that bonded all beings on the planet. A world that didn't know the word enemy, where everyone happily agreed that we're all one people, originating from the same source of non-being. Picture a world that understood that harming anyone would be analogous to harming oneself. Unfortunately, while there's never been such a state of affairs among humans during the entire written history of civilization, this is the vision of Lao Tzu in the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching, and it's my vision for what's possible when we work at being Tao-centered people with Tao-centered leadership. This grand vision begins right here, right now, with you. Remove the concept of enemy from your life and model this behavior for those around you. Ultimately, the ripple effect will move everyone around the globe toward an enemy-less world. Recently, a deranged man armed with guns and ammunition barricaded himself in an Amish schoolhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where he proceeded to murder several girls. As the peaceful, Tao-centered Christian members of this close-knit community grieved over their unspeakably horrific losses, they invited the family of the killer to mourn with them at the mass funeral and prayed for the killer as well. As the Amish leader said, quote, "We have no enemies, we are all God's children, and forgiveness is at the very core of our Christian faith. If we can't forgive those who are lost and would do harm to us, then our faith would be meaningless." Unquote. These beautiful words are so similar in feeling to what Lao Tzu wrote in this verse. There is no greater misfortune than feeling, I have an enemy. And when two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph. So how can you have an opponent without an enemy? In her illuminating book, The Tao of Inner Peace, Dyer offers a response to that question. Keep this in mind as you apply the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching into your own life. Quote, "The old perception of conflict as combat only narrows our vision. It limits our choices. It pulls us into endless struggles between competing polarities." Unquote. She then adds, quote, "Making enemies gives away our power, keeps us from taking responsibility for our lives. Instead of resolving conflict, we focus our attention on fearing, hating, and lashing out at perceived enemies." Unquote. The lesson from Diane's brilliant book, as well as this verse of the Tao Te Ching and the statement of the Amish community leader, is that conflict doesn't have to mean combat. In other words, someone with a contrary point of view doesn't have to be the enemy. Imagine if every general took these words of the Tao Te Ching to heart and practiced them. I dare not make the first move. There's no way war could exist. Lao Tzu advised that if war ever does become inevitable, one should practice defense rather than offense. One should never initiate hostilities, but recognize in the heat of battle that the battle itself is something to grieve about. With no concept of enemy and a heart that's filled with compassion, one stays harmonized with the Tao. The presence of combat, whether verbal or physical, is an indication that contact with the Tao has been lost. There should be no celebration, and every war and battleground conflict should be treated as a funeral with compassion ruling the day. As I sit here contemplating the visage of Lao Tzu, he seems to say that a world free from foes isn't as impossible as you may believe. This is how you can put this wisdom to work for you now. First, refuse to think of anyone as your adversary. Reread the most important line in this verse. When I and enemy exist together, there's no room left for my treasure. Your treasure is your peace of mind and your Tao connection, so your competitors in business, your opponents in an athletic match, and the members of a competing political party are not your foes, and those people whom a government declares are your enemies are most assuredly not. Affirm, I have no enemies. There are people with whom I have strong disagreements. I may even be required to defend myself and my way of life, but I will not think of them as enemies. Recall Lao Tzu's statement that the person without an enemy will surely triumph. Be that individual right now. And secondly, vow to never start a fight. Stay on the defensive side of disputes, aligning with Lao Tzu's advice to play the guest rather than make the first move. See colleagues where you once saw combatants by finding yourself in them. Convey compassion and caring towards your perceived adversaries who are actually representing a part of you. Refuse to start a fight, reminding yourself that you'd be battling with yourself. Find a way to see oneness in a holy encounter, since all of us are of the Tao. Do the Tao now. Reproduce these words found in Anne Frank's diary, written as she was being hunted by the Nazis. Quote, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I can feel the sufferings of millions, and yet if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come out right." Unquote. Post this for everyone in your family to see.